Order, order. The speakers are making more noise than the audience. What can I say? They're not coming to order. Okay. So, welcome everyone to our, this is like third or fourth in-person meeting with our GSA eligible agencies. We're here today to this is a really great time because what we're going to do is bring forth the fruits of our work for the past 5-6 months, which is our JPA. And I'm going to review just the agenda with you quickly and then go over a few ground rules and then we'll start right in. So notice that we're going to do our typical meeting business. We're going to have some minutes to approve, and we'll do this Sustainable Groundwater Management Act update, which Tim will give, and Tim always gives this at our meetings. And then we're going to talk about the agreement. Now, we're not going to go through the whole JPA, but what we have here, and you all should have copies, is a summary of what the JPA contains. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. You will have your JPA eligible agency reps give a little bit of talking, do a little talking about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about what the next steps are for this group. And then after that, they'll make a few comments, and then we'll have it open up for all of you to ask questions and make comments to the group here and have an interactive discussion. So with that, just let me go over the ground rules again. These are the same ground rules we have every time. One person speaking at a time, and if a lot of people raise his or her hand, then I will just have you form a queue. And due to the fact that they can't see you if you talk from your seat, that it will be what we'd like you to do. I'll call on you and say number one, number two. You go up to the mic over there, the podium, so that they'll be able to video you as you're speaking and asking your question. So that's the first thing. Limit side conversations. That means all the people in the front can't be talking to one another while we're doing the presentations, right? Right. Okay. And then the next one is respecting integrity and values of others, which you all do. No deride. But some places it doesn't happen, so that's usually a ground rule. But nothing's happened like that here, so I probably don't even need to mention it. But this one I do. Focus questions and comments on the topic under discussion. So tonight we're going to be talking mainly about the JPA. So this is what we hope that you're going to focus on, making comments, questions, etc., to the representatives up here and their attorneys. So that's what I would like you to make sure that you stick to that. And if you get off the track, I will probably have to limit you. I don't want to, but I will have to if you take off. Because everybody should have a chance, and that's the next ground rule, which is honor time. Make sure that you think about the fact that if you talk on for a long time and I don't cut you off, that you might be infringing on someone else's ability. So that's an important ground rule. And then last of all, turn off your cell phones, and I better do that because I think mine went off the last time. So with that, I'm going to have the members up at the front introduce themselves, and then also the staff that has worked so hard on putting this all together, including our attorneys and our general managers, etc. So let's start at the far end with Bob Harrington.
Bob Harrington, County Water Director.
I'm going to let you pass this.
5th District Supervisor.
Mick Gleason, Kern County.
Peter Brown, Director for the Indian Wells Valley Water District.
Peggy Breen, City of Ridgecrest.
Brian Longbottom, the Public Works Officer of the base.
Tim Parker, Technical Consultant to this group under contract to Kern County.
And I'm Dale Schaefer, and I'm working as a facilitator for you all through Department of Water Resources. Okay, front row. Let's start with who's working on it.
Jim Worth, Legal Counsel, Indian Wells Valley Water District.
Chuck Griffin, Board Member, Indian Wells Valley Water District.
Don Sadiba, General Manager, Indian Wells Valley Water District.
Good evening, folks. I'm Keith Lemieux. I'm the City Attorney.
Good evening, Phil Hall, Kern County Counsel's Office.
Hello, I'm Jared Markley. I'm the Region Environmental Counsel for Navy Region Southwest.
Evening, I'm Lieutenant Foley. I'm counsel for the base.
Why don't you introduce him so I don't have to run all the way back there? How's that?
Dennis Spears, City of Ridgecrest. Dennis, would you say hi? Thank you.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone else who's been working on this? Okay. All right, with that, let's see if we have any problem. Who else? Who wears that? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Tim.
Evening, Don Cordichado, IWV Water District.
Oh, I haven't met you. That's why. Hi, Don. Yeah, right. Goodness. Oh, I do remember you. You should be sitting more toward the front so I don't forget.
Leroy Corlett, Director, Indian Wells Valley Water District.
Thank you. Anybody else I missed? Okay. Great. Okay, so then the meeting notes for our last meeting, which was June 10th, it was a telecom meeting. They have been sent out to everybody, and I haven't heard any edits or comments. So I'm just going to ask the representatives if there were any comments or any corrections to the meeting notes. They're listed draft now, and if not, then I will consider them approved, and they should be up on the web. Okay. Approved as written. Okay, so the next item is the Sigma Groundwater Management Act, and Tim is going to give an update to you. You have a series of slides that he's going to reference, and you should have them. They're out on the table if you don't. So, Tim?
Okay, thank you. And what I have is a presentation that will not only be a Sigma update, but also kind of revisit what we've heard before, because we realize that we can't expect everybody to have been to the last few meetings. So if you've heard this before, I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. So just relax, and if you haven't heard it before, hopefully you'll find it interesting. And so this is a nice little diagram of a conceptual model of kind of groundwater moving through the ground, and it's never that simple. I'll just say that. And here's an overview. So I'm going to do the reminder of the Sigma requirements and step back and remind people what the state said at the last meeting, just to keep us all mindful of what the requirements are and what we have to do and what happens if we don't do it. And then I'll jump into the Sigma update. So the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was signed by the governor September 16th, and it became effective January 1st, 2015. And it recognizes the preferences for local management and control of groundwater. And these are some of the authorities that these new groundwater sustainability agencies will have to conduct studies, review and monitor wells, set well spacing requirements, require extraction reporting of non-de minimis wells. You may hear that term again, but that's private well owners that pump less than 2 acre-feet a year. And to implement capital projects and to assess fees to cover the costs of these new requirements by the state. And then it provides the state as a backstop to regulate unmanaged or poorly managed areas. And one of the things the state was required to do was to prioritize the basins. So the map on the left shows the prioritization of basins, and the orange and yellow are the high and medium priority basins, and those are the basins that fall under Sigma. And then on the right, the map is of the critically overdrafted basins, and you'll see arrows on both of those maps pointing out the Indian Wells Valley. So it's designated a medium priority basin under Sigma, but then the state looked at it under critically overdrafted conditions and designated critically overdrafted. And for the purposes of that meaning, all that really means is you have 2 years less to do the groundwater sustainability plan. It has to be done in 2020 instead of 2022. And just a reminder, this is a slide from, the next set of slides is from DWR's presentation. I think it was actually last fall. But basically that they looked at the basin in terms of critically overdrafted and found that more than 30 hydrographs indicate that the groundwater levels are declining. And they reviewed over 20 technical reports, and they looked at water quality. And this is a typical hydrograph if you're not familiar with it. On the left is its feet, and the bottom axis is years. And basically it displays from 1960 to 2016, 56 years. For this particular well, it shows a 42-foot decline. So that's not a lot, but it's constant. That's the message, and that's what we're seeing here, 1 to 2 feet a year, depending on where you are in the basin. So it's actually not a lot, but it's constant, and it is something that is required to be fixed or mitigated under Sigma. And then here are some of the wells. The red dots are the ones that show constant decline. The blue ones are not in decline. And the green ones are in decline, but they weren't considered chronic decline. So that's a map of the wells that they showed. So, and then they also looked at groundwater quality, and basically this is water level change. So this is annual rate of water level change, and you'll see the red circle is where the highest rate of change is in the map. And so this is just a list of the references reviewed. The list on the right show overdraft or water level declines, and then there were a few reports that didn't show that. But the majority of the technical work that's done came to the same conclusion. The basin was in overdraft, and there are groundwater declines. So just in summary, it's been documented in overdraft. It's declines of 1 to 2 feet per year, and GSA needs to be formed by June 30th. And it was listed as critically overdrafted, and it needs to be sustainably managed within 20 years of adoption. So that's really what Sigma says. Here's just a table for your interest, and it's, again, you have a handout that shows some of the summary information on the groundwater users in the basin. And the bottom line, I think the emphasis I would make is that currently the uses in 2010 and 2013 show an overdraft of an estimated overdraft about 15,000 acre feet a year or a little bit more. That's an estimate, so it's not an exact number. So don't get fixated on that. But it's a pretty large amount. And then with increasing pumping estimated for agriculture, the pistachio trees that are immature, that could go up as much as another 9,000 feet. So that's just a reminder. And so, again, the step 1 is forming the groundwater sustainability agencies. That's what's being done now. And step 2 is to develop a plan. And step 3 is to achieve sustainability in 20 years after adoption of the plan. A little bit on who's eligible to form a groundwater sustainability agency, and this is out of the law. It's any local agency that does one of the following: supplies water, manages water, or controls land use. And counties are the default GSA in unmanaged areas. That's an area meant to be an area that's not a city, within city limits, or under some sort of a jurisdiction of a water district, or one of these local agencies that supplies water, manages water, or controls land use. And there can be more than one of these in a basin. Domestic wells, so back to the de minimis wells. That's defined as less, or 2 acre feet or less per year, and it's domestic, so it's a household. And then the GSAs can decide how de minimis users are incorporated into the process. They can decide to exclude or include. They can decide on fees, but they cannot require metering of your wells, of your domestic wells. And domestic wells can also be regulated by authorities outside the scope of Sigma. So counties and cities can regulate under outside the scope of Sigma. The second step, is to develop a groundwater sustainability plan, and that has to be by January 31st, 2020. And the draft regulations are being promulgated into law as we speak, and I'm going to touch on that in Sigma. There was a process that went on over the last year to collect comments and refine those, and I'll touch on those in a little bit in the Sigma update. And then achieve sustainability in 20 years. And the red, these are the sustainability indicators, which I'll touch on again, but basically the ones that are probably of the main concern here in the basin is lowering of groundwater levels, which is directly linked to reduction in groundwater storage, and then there's also water quality degradation in the southern part of the basin. Total dissolved solids in wells, the measurement of that seems to be going up a little bit. So what are the options that we'll be looking at? Reducing demand, increasing conservation, increasing recycled water use, trying to increase recharge when water is available for that. And there's a brackish water project that's being looked at, which won't actually increase volume, but it could extend things, and there may be some options to exchange water, fresh water for brackish water, depending on whether or not there's a surface supply at some point in the future. That's all up in the air. No decisions have been made, but those are a standard list of options that you look at in a basin. And then outreach and input. SGMA requires that the GSA shall consider the interests of all beneficial uses and users of groundwater, and this is a list of those uses and users that are provided in the law. The backstop. If we don't do all these things, this is basically what this table says, the state board, the State Water Resources Control Board, will step in and do it for us. And they can develop fees to support basin management and assess those fees on groundwater users. They can designate probationary basins. That's the first step. If you don't meet the requirements, they'll designate you a probationary basin. And the probationary basins lead to interim sustainability plans that the state can develop. And interim plans manage basins until local efforts come up to speed. It's temporary. So the state would step in and do the plan and then hand it back to the locals to implement. It would focus on demand management. They're not going to look at new projects. They're not going to look at different ways to mitigate. They're just going to cut down the pumping. That's the way they said that they would do this. And then you would reimburse the state. The state's a lot more costly. They have a lot higher overhead, and they're not as efficient as when you would plan it yourself. I can tell you that from experience working in different types of work. But and then a basin adjudication after January 1 would still be required to comply with all the requirements of SGMA. So adjudication will not solve this. So with that, I'm going to, with that cheery conversation, I'm going to turn over to the SGMA update, and I've just got a few slides now. And so Groundwater Sustainability Agency formation. To date, there's been 171 filings. 75 exclusive GSAs have formed, and 74 are in overlap status. Now, what that means is that if their jurisdictions overlap, 2 jurisdictions overlap on the GSAs, they're not considered viable. They have to sort those out. Basically, they can't become a GSA if there's overlap. So that's quite a few. And then there's 22 in a 90-day waiting period. When you file your notice to form a GSA, it goes to DWR, and then they wait 90 days to see if somebody else files. And if you don't, then you're considered the GSA for the area. Groundwater Sustainability Plan regulations, I touched on this. They were adopted May 18th at the California Water Commission, scheduled for promulgation by June 1st, and there were 153 formal letters with over 2,000 comments on these regulations. They went from close to 100 pages of regulations down to less than 50, so they did do quite a bit of editing and refining, but quite a bit of work on that. And I should point out, so there's a web page up at the top here, and that'll take you to all this information that's on the web if you don't have that yet, if you haven't accessed that website. And so what goes into one of these plans according to these regulations? Well, you have a goal. You have to develop a water budget and a sustainable yield for the basin. You have to put together, summarize the science of the past 50 years of hydrology, or whatever you have available. And then you have a 50-year planning horizon looking forward. So you have to do the planning for 50 years, which a lot of people figure is going to be difficult because most general plans, which you base a lot of the work you do on, only go out 20 years. So how do you do those projections? That's going to be one of the questions. Detailed monitoring program, a data management system is required for each one of these areas, and stakeholder involvement, and I touched on that. And it gets better. This is new, groundwater sustainability indicators. Those 6 that I mentioned, and they're in italics down at the bottom, are groundwater levels, groundwater storage, groundwater quality, land subsidence, seawater intrusion, and surface water depletion and ecosystems are the sustainability indicators. And if you have indicators that... Well, that's interesting. Did somebody touch this? Siri is alive. Seriously. Well, that's a new one. Thanks, Keith. Learn something new every day about iPhones. Anyway, so we have these 6 sustainability indicators, and if they appear to have issues, in other words, if they have potentially, and in the law it says significant or unreasonable, undesirable results, then you have to establish measurable objectives, minimum thresholds, and 5-year milestones for them. The minimum thresholds, basically the lowest that, for example, groundwater levels would go over a given time. The measurable objectives are what you're trying to reach at the top, the goal that you set, and then you have 5-year milestones for 20 years in your plan. And I'm almost done. So the sustainability plan content, again, projects and actions to meet your sustainability goal by 2040. So that's 20 years from when the last date you can adopt it. And then an annual data submittal is required to the state. And then you do a periodic review and update of the groundwater sustainability plan. So that's a really quick, broad overview of what needs to go into one of these plans. And then last things, best management practices. That's the other piece. So one of the things that DWR did was they took some of the stuff out of the regulations that can be considered and put into best management practices. So these are things like, how are you going to do models, what kind of models to use, and what kind of processes you should go into models for groundwater levels, measurement, protocols and that kind of thing. And so those are being initiated. They haven't really started working on them. They've had one advisory group meeting, but they're due at the end of the year. Basin boundary modifications. Some of the basins are modifying their areas, and they at 54 were submitted to the state, and there's public meetings scheduled in July. There were no basin boundary modifications for the Indian Wells Valley. And then finally, water available for replenishment. There's a draft white paper on the website, and they have a report due December 31st, 2016. And really, the state's taking a broad look at how much surface water might be available throughout the state by looking at the drainages and looking at stream gauges and trying to determine how much water there is out there. And that will help local agencies plan to determine how much surface water might be available in their area for replenishment, for example. And then one more slide. Some of the legislation going on, there were like 80 bills this year on groundwater, and here's just a few that I've been tracking related to some of the things going on. The Open and Transparent Data Act, one of the things I didn't mention is DWR is developing a white paper on their data framework. One of the challenges in water is how do you get your hands on all the data. You can go to the State Water Board, especially groundwater, and you can go to the Department of Water Resources, but their databases don't talk to one another. So this Open Data Transparent Act would require the Resources Agency to work with DWR, State Board, and Fish and Wildlife to develop protocols data collection and transfer protocols to facilitate moving data back and forth. SB 995 PABLE is well standards. The water well standards haven't been updated for several decades, and it basically spells out how you construct wells to protect aquifers, and so that's being moved. That's moving. And actually, I didn't mention Dodds and Senate Natural Resources and Water. This legislation has to get through in the next few months to make it to the governor's desk. So it's going to the Natural Resources and Water Committee. I believe it's June 28th. I think they're all meeting on June 28th. Well standards going to environmental safety and toxics. I think it's June 28th as well. And that's SB 1317 WALK. You may have heard of this one. Conditional use permit, groundwater extraction facility. So this would, originally it said it would require a conditional use permit, that cities and counties would have to do this for any new groundwater extraction facility other than a de minimis well. That's changed now, and it basically says the cities and counties have to come up with a process that makes a new groundwater extraction facility project proponent develop a report that demonstrates that it won't cause an undesirable result as prescribed under SGMA, or that it won't exacerbate one. It's unclear whether that's going to make it through the assembly or not, but that's where that's at. And I think that's it. Yep. So that's it. Thank you very much.
My question is on 1317. Isn't that redundant? Because the way you said it is you have to, whoever the new producer of this water has to go to the county, the city, to ask if there, to show there's no undesirable effects. Correct? Right. Doesn't that law already exist?
No, not really. I mean, basically most counties handle the well permitting, and most counties have a ministerial, basically it's a fill out a form and check boxes kind of a thing. So and I've heard of areas where there are 30 wells suddenly coming in for permitting. So I think that what I understand from Senator Walk is that she's trying to bridge the gap between now and when GSAs start taking a stronger role in managing groundwater and getting information out there. So the counties could, Nick, the counties could say no to those permits, but but typically it's not that working that way, and I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts on it, but.
I know that Kern County is working toward a better understanding of the permitting process. Right now, he's absolutely right. What we do it is a well permit comes across the public health desk, and it's ministerial. It's stamped, and off it goes. We're having a review of that and a determination of how we best manage well permitting in Kern County. And I don't have any facts other than that.
Hey, Tim, real quick on the groundwater sustainability plan content, we talk about data management systems. Is that tied to the AB 1755 you mentioned with the open and transparent data? So our plan has to be based off that legislation. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so one of the things that some of us in the industry have recognized for a few decades is that you go into a basin and you want to do an assessment, and the data is all over the place. It's in different formats. There's different protocols being used, so it's a mixed bag. So this open data thing would help to make sure that the data are in more accessible formats, and they're using the same kind of protocols. The same thing could be said for the best management practices. So really, this could help us, help every basin in terms of standardizing things. So that's where it's going, and hopefully it happens sooner rather than later, because all these basins are going to be working on data management systems, and if they don't do similar things, then it'll be difficult to transfer data and that kind of thing. So does that answer you? Great.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything more for Tim? Yes.
Well, I think this is supposed to be a process where we get sustainability out of the basin, and I don't hear it going that direction.
I think the question or comment is, if I can try to characterize it or rephrase it for you, is that you haven't heard anything about reduction or reducing demand, and that was actually on my list, and that's actually on the state board's list. That's typically. I think one way to look at it is nobody wants to feel the pain immediately. So we all want to look at the balance, the water budget, what's the sustainable yield, and then look at the options, look at all the options, look at what they're going to cost, and then come back and start, once we have been able to sharpen our pencils to say in terms of how close can we get to the sustainable yield, then we have to start talking about demand. That's typically, I think, the process. But I think that I think it's really good you're bringing it up, that we all have to start thinking about that, that this is one of those basins that, there's pretty limited options, and there may have to be some reductions. So. We're getting into the
comments from the JPA. So can I ask you to hold this while we talk about the JPA?
Right.
I'll ask you to come up so everybody can hear your comments.
Right. And I'd just like to express one thing, is that we're all in this together, and that that everybody's got a voice, and to start singling out anybody right away is and I understand where you're coming from, but we're all going to have to do. Everybody's going to have to do their share in this basin. So that's what I would just add. So with that, and so we'll get on to the JPA.
Yeah, and sir, you will be. Your name is Stuart. You will be first in the queue. Okay. All right. So you all have a copy of the JPA, and the JPA, actually, the version that you should have is June 15th, 2016, without the signature line. So you've got the latest. That's like 2 days ago. So that's the JPA we're working off of. But instead of going through the entire JPA, which would keep us here for a long time, what we did, Tim put together a summary of the important points in the JPA, and you have a copy of that also. And so what I'm going to have the reps do from the city and from the water district and from the county, they're going to discuss this summary with you and talk about what the group has done. So I'm going to start this with Supervisor Gleason. That's later, yeah. Start with this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks. This has been a lot of work. It has not been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of grueling, at sometimes significant conversations, and actually I'm thrilled to see the lawyers sitting in the same row right beside each other, all three of them over there looking, still smiling and talking with each other. But they've all done a great job, and I think you'd all be proud of all three of them and everybody else who participated in this whole deal, because this has never been done before. There is no model. There is no cookie-cutter approach. There is no go to A, then go to B, then go to C, and you'll get to the end zone. That's not the way this is, we are creating our own paradigm. And so the challenges are there. The focus has been for each of us to talk about self, and self-interest and self-preservation, what's best for the county, what's best for the city or the water district or this county, that county. And it's morphed into a realization that the best thing we can do is work together to create a sustainability plan. And that has been the focus in the final throes of this development of this JPA. And so I'm proud of all three of the lawyers who really ground it out. And they've all done great work. But this JPA provides for the creation of the authority. It's a separate agency. It has its own board of directors, our JPA. The authority is subject to open and public meeting laws. That means that we're going to be at our next meeting, hopefully, sitting at the dais. We'll be subject to the Brown Act, which means it'll be just like your city council meetings or the board of supervisors meetings or the water district meetings. We'll have it in a formal place with the transparency that is guaranteed by the Brown Act. And that's the best place for us to get as quick as we can, and we're trying to. The authority will also be subject to open records laws. So the same thing, you want a copy of something, you go through the formal procedures to get a copy, and we're obliged to give you the response, and our responsibility is to give you the copy that you ask for. The general powers of the authority, each of us bring powers. Each of the agencies represented on this board will have some type of power that we bring to the table. We will have an individual power that we're offering to the common good of the GSA. I'll have the police powers for the county. I'll be bringing those into the table so that we can work together to understand those powers and make votes to apply those powers in some cases. And it also creates additional powers granted to us by the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So not only do we come with our individual powers and authorities, but we also have specific powers and authorities granted to us by this new law. Eventually, we'll serve as the exclusive groundwater sustainability agency for the Indian Wells Valley groundwater basin. That's what we're going to be. We're going to be the agency that serves as the exclusive groundwater sustainability agency. And we will eventually, our purpose is to eventually adopt and implement a groundwater sustainability plan. That's what this whole thing is about, and that's where we're going. The general members of this board are the City of Ridgecrest, Indian Wells Valley Water District, and the three counties, Inyo, Kern, and San Bernardino County. The associate members are the United States Department of Interior, Bureau of Land Management, and the U.S. Navy.
If you read along with me, if you have it there, board membership and voting. Each general member is afforded one voting director seat on the board. Aside from a very routine matters, board business requires a majority vote of the board of directors and the concurrence of no less than 2 of the directors of the city, of Kern County, or the Indian Wells Valley Water District. The adoption of a GSP, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, will require a supermajority vote. That's 4 of 5. And the associate members are afforded a representative non-voting seat on the board. All those are the things that are the beginning of all of us working together. It doesn't promise success. It gives us a path. And our working together will help make that path happen. The only way it's going to be is all of us recognize we're in this basin together, and is best decided by all of us how it happens and what we do. The next part.
That's me.
That's you, Peter.
So the formation of the committees is actually where all the heavy lifting will be done to create the plan, and that's where we're really going to come into the details of how we're going to do all this to meet those requirements that Tim spoke of earlier. So I could read it. Advisory committees will be established to provide recommendations to the board on various activities of the authority, which is basically how it's going to function and how we're going to implement the SIGMA. Advisory committees will be formed to ensure meaningful participation, which is a word we keep trying to use and do really mean, groundwater use in the basin. So the advisory committee is really important, and everybody will be part of that, especially people that have more interest than others. The de minimis users are not off the table, or nor is anybody else. We just don't know how we're going to form this yet, or what we're going to do. But everybody will have a voice. Everybody will have a way to communicate. And this is where it's going to all happen. We're going to meet regularly. I imagine we'll meet here, or probably Peggy said she'd pay for that. Yeah. And like they said earlier, these will be public meetings. They'll be noticed. You'll have an agenda, agendized. We'll be approving minutes, just like everything else in the world. The good part of it is it will work. To get 3 counties, 4 attorneys, or 5, or 6, or 7, I don't know how many were on the phone, to get all of us to come to this point was a complete miracle. And I really have to say it looks pretty darn good. It's not exactly what I wanted. However, everybody seems to be in agreement that it fits the best size for everybody.
Thank you. Okay. Just, I want to make sure that you all are in agreement with this June 15th draft. We actually approved, and you know, Peter, what he just said is really true. It did end up being almost a miracle. It actually, you know, you really worked well together. And on the 10th of June, at the end of the meeting, the agencies agreed by consensus, even if all of them weren't exactly perfectly happy with it, Peter, but they could all live with it. And so they agreed by consensus that this was the JPA that they were going to start working with. So this happened on the 10th, but since then there's been a few iterations, mainly I think Phil would concur that they were typos and wordsmithing, language changes, and all of the members have seen all of those. And the last draft is the one you have in front of you, the June 15th draft. So I just want to be sure that you're all on board with the June 15th draft. Matt?
We just have a few changes we wanted. I'm just kidding.
Well, just say I first. Say I first.
I just wanted to point out there's one section in here that Inyo County worked hard on and is important to us. It's section 4.04, and it's not in the summary, but it talks about limiting groundwater export from one jurisdiction to another. And Inyo County has a history of exporting water, so limiting that or giving us a voice in not allowing that to happen is really important. And we're happy that all the members of the new GSA agreed to put in some language that helped protect Inyo County from water export. And so I just wanted to mention that. Yeah.
Does anyone have any objections to the June 15th draft?
I don't have an objection, but let me state our attorney, who has been involved in every meeting and discussion, and our city manager has been involved in most of them. We are prepared to take it to our board, our council, and that's where we are right now. And recommend. I'm sorry. Thank you, Keith. That's why the attorney tells me how to speak. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So the other question as you answer is, do you have a date that you will be taking this to your board or council?
It's going to be on our next meeting on the 6th of July.
And Inyo County is planning to take that on July 12th.
And we're going to do the same second Monday in July, whatever day that is. Our normal board meeting. It'll be noticed on the agenda. 19th?
June or July?
July. Whatever.
July
11th.
Yeah, we're going to try either the 19th or the 26th of July. We're going to bring it to our board, and I'm going to recommend approval. I agree with Peter. I didn't get everything I wanted, but I have no objection to the entirety as a whole.
So, maybe just would you like to say something? Just a few comments from each of you about.
Oh, wait. San Bernardino, is somebody going to say something for them?
Yeah,
I was just going to say, San Bernardino is in
Sure. This is from Board of Supervisors, County of San Bernardino, Robert Lovingood, Supervisor, 1st District, June 16th, 2016. Dear Chairman Gleason, I wish to thank you and the officials, staff, lawyers, and consultants of the County of Kern, County of Inyo, City of Ridgecrest, Indian Wells Valley Water District for all the hard work over the past several months put into drafting the joint exercise of powers agreement, the agreement to establish the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority. I believe this collaborative effort has resulted in a strong framework for complying with the mandates set forth in the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act to sustainably manage the Indian Wells Valley Basin in a way that will consider the interests and address the concerns of all the communities and parties that rely upon the basin for their water supply. As such, I will recommend to my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors for the County of San Bernardino that we approve the joint exercise of powers agreement to form the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority at our regular meeting on July 12, 2016. Unfortunately, due to prior commitments, I am unable to attend the public meeting at the City of Ridgecrest City Hall tonight, at which the agreement will be presented and discussed. Please share with the public my support for the consensus we have reached on the agreement. Thank you. Signed, Robert Lovingood, 1st District Supervisor, Vice Chairman, San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors.
So, would you like to make a comment on the bidding process? Anything else that you'd like to talk about?
I'll just say that although Inyo County just has a small piece of this, we are going to start our own. We have to start our own GSA process, and because of the hard work of Bob Harrington and our water department, our aquifers, and the long-term water agreement, and how we've enforced the long-term water agreement, our aquifers are not in the overdraft status that these are, so we are on a different track, but it will be still difficult and but probably not as tough as forming this GSA. I'll just say I think watching Mick as he's gone through this process, I've been really impressed with how hard he's worked, how hard he's tried to include everyone, but still get the process through. And I think we're all happy that he's worked this hard and Kern County has pushed this hard to get the GSA put together.
Mick?
Yes. Thanks, Matt. We have a bunch of lawyers, as you can imagine. Phil's only one. We have some lawyers up in Sacramento who work with us, who are very well cued into the water law in Sacramento. And as we were going through the whole process of developing this GSA, he says to me, Mick, why don't you, this is the analogy you need to use, and everybody needs to understand. The state has moved you to the edge of the cliff, and the state is telling you, jump. And that's all we know. And so the only way to survive is if we jump together. And if we don't jump together, then they're going to come and push us all off. It's just that simple. And perfection is the enemy of good. And in developing this JPA, I'll be the first one to tell you that it's not perfect. There's a lot of things in it that still needs to be tweaked. And one of the key ingredients is that we've developed is that relationship where we can make changes to this as we move forward when changes are required. And I'm not afraid to support making those changes because I don't suspect that this is perfect. I think it's a good start, but it's not perfect. And I'm looking forward to working closely with everybody in this table to make sure that we get a sustained water basin in the proper amount of time.
Thanks. Mick. Peter?
So, actually, the version that I came up with was perfect, but I was the only one that liked it, so that didn't work.
And it was a long time ago. We would have been done.
Yeah, I think it was like 11 or 12 months ago. I think in generalities and trends, so it was easy for me to just invent something from midair. Anyways, so the good news, which everybody here already knows, is we've already had a groundwater management steering committee. We've been sharing data for well over 20 years, and our data is compiled. So we're like super way ahead of the curve. In fact, that's one of the reasons people like us, because they can use us to study because the data is consistent. And we actually know how it was collected, which makes a difference when you're looking at elevations and stuff like that. The other good thing is we've already started to conserve. So your trends should start showing a difference over time. The water district, we achieved 32% reduction this last month, 31.7 if you want to 31.9. So why do I care about the 0.9?
Very cool.
So 32%, and that's from 2015 totals, et cetera. So we were mandated to do that. So like a great business, we're cutting off our necks to save water because that is our revenue stream. However, we're adapting. And so that's the good news. The other good news is the base. I think you guys are you at 70% or 65 from whatever? I mean, last time I heard it was 60% reduction in usage. 2007 baseline for the base. Okay. Well, okay. I'm exaggerating a tad. The point is those are huge numbers. So this isn't all dark. We've already made killer good progress. We're changing a society of people. We're changing a culture into understanding that we live in a desert. And that'll just keep having multiplying effects as we go from here. We still have a couple 100,000-ish. How much do we have left in our fund? Yeah, 197,000 for cash for grass. And so we're paying people to change. But the other good thing is there's some really nice looking stuff out there. And people are they're embracing the process instead of just, getting mad about it. So if the culture can change, and we're looking at 5 years or something like that, and it's changing well. We're not having to do a lot of heavy-handed stuff, and we don't like that. We would rather have a lot of carrots. But we're not needing to do that. And so right away you see that everybody wants to make a difference. So we're already working together. We've already got our consumption a lot, and the base is curtailed theirs a lot. I'm sure the city has done the same because your yards just don't look as good as they did last year. But I'm sure you're doing all that too. So anyways, it's not bad news. It's just something we're doing. And there are some good things on the horizon.
Thanks, Peter. Peggy?
I think the thing that I can say the most and my greatest wish for all this is a period of trust and understanding, because this has been very difficult for some of us to say, I'm willing to put my future in your hands. But you know what? It's not really I'm putting my future. It's all of us putting our future in our own hands. There is no way in God's green earth I want to see the state come in and do it for us. Again, us, working together, all of us on committees, on boards, with assignments, because that's what makes us all better. Whether you live in the county, whether you live in the city, whether you live in Inyo or San Bernardino County, or whether you're involved in the base or the BLM, it's all of us working together. And that is the first step, that we are going to trust each other. Give us all, and give yourselves the benefit of the doubt until you see that it hasn't been. And then speak up. Tell us what you think, because that's the only way it's going to work. And get involved and work and make it better. Is that a Pollyannish point of view? Maybe. But you know what? It's the truth. And I thank you all.
Good job, Peggy. No, go ahead, Brian.
Sure. For me, this is exciting because it's, we've all been, as Peter said, we've all been working on projects over the last 5, 6, 8, 10, and on years to do water reduction. The Navy, we've reduced since 2007, 53.7, 54%. I'm happy to say we're investing another $1 million on the base here this year to further our reduction. So we haven't stopped, and I think all entities up here are heading down the road to keep going in the direction we need to be going. This just really formalizes and pulls us all together, and so that we're all pulling in the same direction and working together and sharing resources. So I think this is fantastic. We all live here together in the community, and none of us are going to be able to survive without the other. And, this is absolutely essential. We're either going to survive and thrive, or we're going to wither on the vine and die together here. So this is the first step so that we can actually start doing proactive work together on reducing the water.
Thank you. That's great. So that's the comments from the people that have been working so hard on this, and you'll get your chance in just a couple minutes. But Tim, I think that now we were going to talk about next steps. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Right. So on the backside of the summary of the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority Joint Powers Agreement, which is a long title, are the next steps for the GSA and the Groundwater Sustainability Agency and Groundwater Sustainability Plan formation in the Indian Wells Valley.
Can you all hear him in the back?
Can you hear me okay?
That's better. That's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's one of these things you have to kind of kiss the mic, I guess, which I don't really appreciate. But so as you heard, general members adopt and execute the JPA at their board and council meetings. I think we heard most of the dates. So there's a place for you to be a voice if you want to talk about this some more. And then we have the associate members, that's the Navy and BLM, enter into memorandum of agreements with the new authority because they can't sign the JPA. They aren't allowed to or whatever legally. So then the authority develops a plan for development of GSP and budget. So that's one of the first things they need to look at, and developing committee structure. And you've heard that a few times, and we'll be talking about that some more in the future as to this meaningful participation and how these committees are going to be structured. And you heard Peter say that's where all the work is going to be done. That's where it's going to be created. That's where the plan's going to be created. And then, and I see that as being, by the way, an iterative process where you do it in pieces. First, you have to come to agreement on the science behind it. In other words, agree on the water budget, the sustainable yield, and the conceptual model of the basin. And so, and then you start talking about measurable objectives, interim measurable objectives, minimum thresholds, and interim milestones, and so on, and looking at projects and actions. Those are all different big pieces to be talking through and coming to agreement on, not all at once. So it's going to take a while, and everybody's going to have to roll up their sleeves and come together, as Peggy said. Then all this has to be done, the adoption of the GSA before June 30th, 2017. For the public hearing, there'll be a public hearing as part of this process. There'll be a public notice at least 14 days before a public hearing, and that's the notification that of the intent to form a GSA here. And then there'll be a public hearing. And we're hoping we'll get the department down here again to say a few words and make them visible, make it visible. And, the Department of Water Resources and the State Board are very interested in this basin. And that's good for all of us because there's some money out there, and hopefully they can help us, bring some funding, some resources in to help solve this problem. And then within 30 days of the public hearing, notification of the election to become a GSA is sent to the State Department of Water Resources, and that it will include the Joint Powers Agreement, and also how the public will be involved. And then there's a 90-day waiting period once that notification goes to the department, and that's I think I mentioned that earlier in terms of the GSA update. That basically they wait to see if there are any other GSAs that file for the same area. And if there aren't any other GSAs that file for the same area, you are a GSA. Basically, that's the process that's described in the law. After the GSA begins operation, here are some of the initial tasks that have to be done, developing a basin data management system. And as Peter mentioned, there's already kind of a base, a foundation for that through the Cooperative Groundwater Management Group. There's Kern County Water Agency has a database. I know the Navy also has a database of information. So those would all be kind of pulled together, coordinating the basin groundwater monitoring. That's already being done, but it would be more formalized under the GSA. There's a groundwater flow model that was created a number of years ago, and that would be updated. as part of this. There's also, we didn't mention this, but there's a brackish water study that's been talked about for a couple of years now, and it's getting close to moving forward. And that would help develop some more information to roll into the hydrogeologic conceptual model, which would go into a revised or new groundwater flow model. And then preparing a groundwater sustainability plan, working with the advisory committee. And then another thing that would be done would be some sort of a cost of service study to develop funding for the plan. And that may raise some eyebrows out there, but basically this has to be paid for, and it's going to be the local community that has to help pay for that. And we'll just have to see what that looks like. It's, as Mick said, it's all new. We're being put on the edge of a cliff, and if we don't jump, then the state's going to push us over. It's not something we're electing to do. Well, I take that back. It is something we're electing to do voluntarily versus having the state come in, but it is a requirement under the law. And have to adopt that plan prior to January 31st, 2020. So that doesn't give us a lot of time to develop this plan, considering all the work that needs to go into it.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, so now it's your turn. So I would like you to think about a question you might have for this group on the information that you've heard. You've received a lot of information on the JPA and its contents and how these people all feel. So, sir, you are number one. Would other people please raise their hands? Anyone else? Okay, two. Yeah, they go up to the podium so that they can be seen. So 1, 2, 3, Donna, you're 3, 2. Yeah.
And did we tell
names.
people they're being video recorded? Well, I did.
Yeah. Okay. Please.
If we told people.
That's why we need you to go up to the podium so that we are being video recorded. Otherwise,
is it live?
Yeah. Otherwise, you get the back of your head videoed. So that was the reason. So would you? Okay. So, sir, go ahead. I'm going to get them to go follow you.
Is this thing live? Can you hear me?
Would you please, give your name, please, sir? And
all right, my name is Stuart Fields. I'm a private well owner. I live 4 miles north of Inyokern. We had a well installed in '94, and that well has dropped over 20 feet since we installed it. We're close to a pistachio orchard, and we're close to an alfalfa orchard. Now, I heard a lot of talk about process here, and I would like to comment at least on that 2-year and critical overdraft. That critical overdraft means more than you have 2 years of a process. It means that we've got a serious problem here. I would like to see the focus go back to the fact that we got a serious problem and not just a 2-year window on a process. But I took the time to look at the acreage involved in all this, and the pistachio acreage and the alfalfa acreage, and I used UC Davis consumption figures for those acreages, and I come up with ag total of 19.6 million gallons of water a day. I went to gallons instead of acre feet because it makes a lot more sense to me. That's 19.6 million gallons a day of water going to ag consumption. Now, NAWS, we looked at it, and NAWS doesn't use much. I found 1.6 million gallons a day, and that was probably before some of this reduction took place. Trona was 2.3 million gallons per day. These are numbers I took off of reports that have already been generated. I didn't generate these numbers myself. Ridgecrest, I updated it to 33,000 residents at 214 gallons a day per person. Now, this came off of one of the latest studies done by Indian Wells Valley Water District. So that turns out to be about 7 million gallons a day of water. All right, neglecting private wells, we ended up with 30.7 million gallons a day. That's neglecting private wells. Now, I put the 32% reduction in there, so we got it down to 28.4 million gallons of water a day. The recharge rate, the best I've heard from anybody, is 7 to 10 million gallons a day. Now, it doesn't take anybody with any kind of a grade school set of mathematics to see that we're in a serious problem. Now, processes and setting up agencies and setting up plans and doing all this increased data management is not doing a thing about correcting that problem. People say we've made all this progress, but I don't see the wells continue to drop at the same rate while we've generated all this paper. it's obvious to me that you've got to reduce the consumption, and I don't hear that in here anywhere.
Would you like someone to comment on your comment, sir? Would you like one of the representatives up here to answer
Sure.
you? Anyone want to take this on?
No one seems to challenge these figures, but yet they ignore them.
Yeah. Well, you're right. But you're also being impractical because it's impossible for us to set restriction measures when we're talking about people's way of life and impacting their lives completely without having a complete and total plan so they can go forward in a sensible way. And like I talked to you earlier, we have a row of lawyers up here who are going to make a lot of money when the lawsuits come because we take a step in a direction that is without working through the legal framework that the state has given us. So I think it's in the better interest of this community to, instead of taking quick stabs at a problem that you've so clearly outlined, and I don't disagree with your data in the least bit, that I acknowledge the problem, but the plan has got to be achieving that together and with the least adverse impact that we can possibly manage. And I don't think you do that by shooting from the hip. I think you do that by crafting a plan, getting that plan that makes sense, and then that's when the difficult decisions are going to be made is in terms of holding to that plan, creating the plan that's going to get us to where we want to go. It took us 60 years to get into this mess. We're not going to get out of this with a couple, omni, do this and do that things. We're going to have to work, develop a plan, implement the plan. It's going to take us years to get out of it. So I'm looking forward to doing that in a collaborative, I suppose we're going to have enough lawsuits already. We don't need to have any more without having some science behind our process. That's my thought.
I just hope you realize that every day that we continue this process means that the future of IWV is shortened by one day.
Okay, Stu, Peter Brown here. It is trending, just like Stu says, and we can all add up the numbers, and they do show that. But there's something that needs to be kept in mind, is that we have a lot of water in storage. We're not going to die tomorrow, and we've never declared that. What we're doing for the first time in the history of everybody is we're working together to actually change the direction of that trend line. So we have a lot of water in storage in a good part of the valley. It's debatable where and how much and how will our water quality be. However, the trends tell us that we have time to act. So we started out at 190 feet to the static water level in 1960-something, and I'm using general numbers, so you engineers, please don't hammer on me. And we're like 300 now. And so those trends were fairly constant. And we're already curtailing usage. So you're going to see the line level out a bit. We're going to work together. There is time. It's not like we're a saucer. We're more of a deep bowl. So we have time to react. Water quality looks really good. There is a little bit in the south, but we have time. So Stu, I totally get what you're saying. And I totally understand it. I have a well too, actually. I'm on water and a well. Not in the same place. Otherwise, I'd have to have a backflow device, right? So anyways, just letting you guys know. Sensitive to the well part. Understand understand that we have a lot of water in storage. And that'll kind of be borne out as we're combining our resources and drilling deeper wells and just to see where the water is. But we're down 1,000 feet. I think most ag wells are down 1,000 feet. And it's excellent water down there. So if you figure just in a general sense, 300 static water level, 1,000 feet was where we're at, and there's water below that. Just gets a little more expensive as you go down. So we have time. Time is available.
Well, can I comment, Peter, that there's more than just IWV Water District involved in this? My well isn't 1,000 feet deep, and if I have to go down that deep, I'm going to run into brackish water. And then I'm going to run into the fact that I'm going to have to put a reverse osmosis machine on there. And guess what that does? I waste 3 gallons of water for every gallon that I get that I can drink. Now, that means my water consumption is going to go up by a factor of 4. Now, I'm not on Indian Wells Valley Water District water. I'm on my private well, and you guys kind of wave your hands and go right on by that.
Well, maybe that's something that they will be considering when they start working on the plan. Stu, when they start putting this all together?
I don't see any small well owners involved in making the plan.
Well, they haven't, go ahead.
Let me say also, Stu, as a former well owner and as the past president before I moved into town of the Indian Wells Valley Well Owners Association, I share your concern. I know what it's like to watch your well dropping. I know what it's like to say it isn't perfect. But I also know that the only way we're going to solve this problem, and I know I sound like a broken record, is that we have to solve it together. Are your issues going to be addressed tomorrow? Absolutely not. They won't be. Will they be addressed? Yes, because the future of this valley is dependent on economic growth. Economic growth is dependent on having the natural resources available to support that, and we must begin to do that. There is no way we can watch wells dropping and say, let's bring a giant golf course. I was going to say casino. I'm not going to go there because the difference is that they are not a huge water user like a giant golf course would be.
Okay.
Stu, give us a chance. I know you've given us 40 years. I'm asking for 5 more.
All right.
Or less.
Thank you, Peggy. Donna? And does anyone else have comments? Sir, you get up after Donnie, you would follow. Donna?
I have some questions about the...
Donna, tell who you are.
Donna Thomas. I'm just representing myself tonight.
Okay.
In some of the documents I've read, I've gone through this one that's called Know Your Options, a guide to farming groundwater sustainability agencies, and Chapter 2 addresses non-public agency representation in the GSA process, or the participation of private stakeholders in the GSA. So my concern is that the representation of these non-public interests is critical to ensuring that all affected interests are considered. And I don't see much in the JPA except to say that they're going to be members of committees. And I think some of these folks may want a more direct involvement to sit at the table with you public folks and have the chance to listen to the conversations and participate in the discussions. So I would like to recommend, there are 2 options listed in this document that says that GSA members may provide or delegate voting power to representatives from groups who are not local public agencies. So I would encourage you, like the county, the city, whatever, to delegate some official representatives to sit at the table with you. Or you could perhaps add a category under associate memberships to allow representatives to be entitled to participate in meetings and discussions of the board. They might be non-voting, not have the requirement to provide funding, where some representatives, like for disadvantaged communities or well owners, might not have that ability to provide the funding. But they would like to be involved in a more direct way. So I'd like for you to consider that. I saw in this document that on page 33, in one GSA that's already been formed, I think it's in Sacramento area, Sacramento County, the county appoints representatives as members of the board. 1 rep for agricultural interests, 1 rep for disadvantaged communities, one rep for conservation interests, one rep of a private water company or mutual water company. It doesn't mean that every mutual would need to be represented individually on the board, but they could have one spokesperson for that group. So I'm glad to see that in Section 502, you do allow for application for new general members who are eligible public agencies. And I think you might have an application coming forth. There's some background work being conducted by the Resource Conservation District. Or I would encourage you to add a category under Section 5.03, Associate Members, a category for non-public or private stakeholder associate members. And then I just had one question under your committee paragraph that Peter started to read previously on page 9, where you talk about meaningful participation of all water users in the basin through committees. But I'd like for you to increase that list to include all the things that are listed in the SIGMA Act. You don't list ag interests, you don't list disadvantaged communities, overlying users. You know, there's an extensive list there that could be addressed in that paragraph. And then I had a question about that last statement. So long as their participation does not violate the state ethics and conflict of interest laws, including Government Code Sections 1090 et sec. Okay, what does that mean for someone who's on the committee, who's representing agricultural interests? What do they have to do regarding ethics and conflict of interest?
Okay, would you like would you like some answers to those questions or comments, Donna?
If you can,
So
yes.
the first one having to do with having non-governmental agencies taking part in the GSA and being represented on the board. So anyone want to talk to that? Any of the GSA eligible reps here?
I would like to have our attorney.
I want him to talk about the ethical issue.
Well,
Okay.
Whatever.
You want him to talk about it?
I don't care. Whatever. That's fine.
I think the question was, what's this about ethics rules and Government Code Section 1090, and how does that apply to people on the committee? Government Code Section 1090 is a conflict of interest section that prevents somebody who's on an elected board from being financially interested in the outcome of a decision being made on that board. It's to protect the public. It's unclear, in my mind, whether or not participation would constitute a conflict of interest under 1090 in a particular situation. We'd have to look at it. But the point of that is to make sure that people who are participating aren't doing so in a way that is violating the state ethics rules. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but how does that apply to agricultural folks who might be on that committee or well owners?
I don't have an answer for you. We'd have to take a look at it when the time comes. It depends on the level of involvement and what the committee's doing and a bunch of other considerations that we would just have to address at the time.
Okay.
And then I think the rest of that was policy questions, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, who would like to speak to her question basically had to do with, well, actually it was her comment of recommending that non-government agencies like the RCD, et cetera, are a seat at the board, either associate or voting or... Go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Donna. I got two things I'd like to throw at you about that. First is that one of the things that I talked about when we established the thing is that each of us come to the table with powers. We have police powers, we have regulatory powers that we come to the table with, that we don't surrender, but we work together. We bring those powers to the table, then together we work to build this plan with land use authority and water use authority. And my understanding of the East Kern RCD is you do not have regulatory authorities.
We operate under Division 9 of the Resources Code, We have submitted a letter to the State Water Resources Control Board to ask for clarification on eligibility for our RCD.
Cool. I welcome that. I'd be glad to hear it, listen to what the state says. The other thought I had is that I didn't think it would be fair to the rest of this board for Kern County to have 2 votes. Because I think you would be representing Kern County, I'm representing Kern County, and each of these other agencies only have 1 vote. So in my mind, those are the 2 main reasons I had for thinking that it might not be in the best interest of this RCD to be a member of our GSA, is because of the multiple vote issue and because of the regulatory powers that I think that you don't have. And if the state changes my mind, I'd be glad to read that. And I appreciate your curiosity. And one other thing I want to say. You will have full ability to participate and ask questions and have conversations with what you talked about, what I heard you say. You will have it as a member of, if you were to become a member of that GSP, or as a member of the public, because now we are going to be Brown Act compliant. It's just the vote that you will not have.
Right.
Well, I think just to keep it simple, the reason that it's set up this way is if you don't like how us elected people do things, you don't vote for us. So there's a cause and effect. If you were sustaining yourself and you had your own thing going on, there is no cause and effect. So you could kind of be out there on how you proceed. So as I'm elected, I have a fiduciary responsibility to the ratepayers. And so everything I do is based on what's best for the ratepayers and the valley. The valley's never sacrificed for the benefit of the ratepayers. However, it is 100% my job to protect their resources, their money, and so if I do something they don't like, I won't be back. And that's kind of the way politics are supposed to work. And usually they do. Small towns, especially, news travels fast. So that's the reason for the elected official part, and then the actual policing powers. So these are the only agencies that actually have land use powers, policing powers. We're water purveyors, and so we're the only one there.
Anyone else want to answer? Peggy, do you want to say anything? Are you okay? All right. Okay, well, thank you, Donna.
Okay. Just one final statement. Increasing the associate membership aspect of adding to your board group, I think would dispel the perception of us and them. It would be more inclusive and more broad-based.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Thank you for the comments.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Chardlow. I'm here on behalf of Meadowbrook Dairy. However, I would like to make a few comments. Personally, I've been a water lawyer for over 10 years. I have not been a water lawyer as long as Kern County's council, who's been a water lawyer for over 60 years, who's actually based in Berkeley, not Sacramento. So you might want to look at those mileage reimbursements if he told you that. I have some personal comments. There was a comment made by you, Mr. Gleason, that this was a hard process for the city and the respective counties because you were trying to protect what was best for the city and counties. I think the standard, and I think Tony Rossman would agree, is really what's best for the basin. And so I would echo Donna's comments about having a more inclusive group of ag interests, disadvantaged communities, private well pumpers, small pumpers, so that the GSA is in line with protecting not just municipal interests, but the basin as a whole. And so I would ask and I would request that you guys look at that. The GSA does not need to be formed until June 1st, 2017. That's more than a year away. It would only take a month or two to try to address some of these issues from some outside interests, which are not municipal interests, which would make the GSA more inclusive. So those are my comments, and I appreciate the consideration of the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments by anyone on the board?
Thanks. I knew it was Berkeley. I just can't say the word. I think it's. I think what I'm hearing you say, sir. I catch the name.
John Shardlow.
Shadlow, John, Mr. Shadlow, is you want an ag interest as a voting member of the GSA.
Or even a non-voting member. And I would say that that's actually how a large majority of GSAs are formed or being formed actively right now. Donnie used the Sacramento Groundwater Authority case. There's the Fox Canyon case, and I can provide you with a whole list where ag interests or disadvantaged community interests or other private interests have a voting right on the GSA committee.
Thanks. I don't know if they heard you, but he didn't hear you. He had a pretty good statement. You want to say that over there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the question was my point that there should be some type of private interest on this board? And my comment was, yes, I think that is the most prudent thing to do and what others have done and what scores of other people have done and are doing. And that's a path and avenue that this board should follow.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My opinion on that is I disagree with that completely. I believe that a self-serving vote on this board would serve as a decaying mechanism for the quality of the vote that would occur. I don't think that I think it would also possibly would be one of those 1090 conflicts that we talked about there. And I also think there's no accountability. That once let's say you own 10 acres and you are going to be a member of this board. And so we said, yes, you can vote. And your vote, you plant, tomatoes. And you're going to vote presumably in your self-serving interest as a member of this board. I think that is not the function of, that's not what I would be doing as a voting member of this board, or nor anybody else. And I think it would cast aspersions at the decisions that we made on the topics that we make. I think they have to be made, and I also think there's no accountability. Once you're on the board, you're on the board. And you can't get up, we can't get you off the board. You're on the board, you're going to make your decision for your tomatoes constantly and every time, whereas if I'm making my decision for a car wash out in town, and people don't like the decision I make, they boot my butt off the board. But they're not going to boot your butt off the board because you're not elected. So I am strongly of the mindset that the members of this board, the voting members of this board, should correlate to the electorate, the people that we represent. They're the ones who need control of the board, not individual farmers or individual car wash people voting for their self-interests. Thanks.
And I would just add that the city and county, the same concern is on the other side, and that's why you have the we versus us versus we, or whatever, because the county's obviously going to be voting in their interests, and the Navy's going to be voting in their interests. And really what should be the actual goal is everybody be voting in the interest of the basin.
Navy doesn't vote.
Huh.
That's correct, but they are a non-voting member who...
They're the associate member.
I mean, as everyone knows, there has been processes that have been put forth where there would be some type of better involvement for some of these outside groups, where there would be no vote whatsoever. Mm-hmm. That process has not came to any type of conclusion where that was going to be the case. We'll continue to fight for that case, and we want to be on your side, not against you. And our interests, I believe, are the same as everyone here, which we are all interested in the basin and its health. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
I'd like to make
Go ahead, Peggy.
I'd like to make a comment. I'd like to make a comment. Okay. One of my concerns, and I shared this with Mrs. Thomas the past couple of days, and in our discussion of people who are associate members having the ability or to vote. The cost to develop this process is probably going to be will be very, very costly. Minimum, I can imagine, is maybe $50,000 or $60,000 to start with for each entity. How many of you and that may want to be the RCD? Do you have $50,000 or $60,000 to come in? I don't think money makes you more valuable. Money makes you more wiser, but it does make you more responsible. So if you're going to vote for something and have an effect on all of us, everybody better contribute the same amount. And if they want to be on there and everybody agrees, then everybody better pay the whole fair share. And it's not going to be cheap. It isn't going to be easy. But that money is part of the issue. And I don't say that those people with money are going to be smarter, but they're certainly going to have to be responsible because it's your nickel, and you're going to vote us out if you don't like what we do. It's as simple as that.
Okay. Thank you, Peggy. Sir, are you waiting in line to speak?
Well, I didn't get in the queue, but I would like to. Yeah.
Well, you may get in the queue.
Okay.
Would you go up to the... Well, I think it's your turn. Unless... Is there anyone else that... Go ahead, Sophie. And then, sir, you will follow Sophie? Okay. Sophia? Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, go up to the mic, Sophia. Thanks.
My name is Sophia Merck. I obviously do not use the water that everybody else uses in the valley. I'm a water hauler, and I'm proud of it. But I know that we need to form this whatever. We need to form it. However, I do concur with Ms. Thomas that we need to enlarge the associate membership, because we need to have our people, whoever they are, whether they haul water and they use 27 gallons a day versus some of the other people that use a lot more. But we're all in the same mud puddle. So we have to get along. But I do think we need to enlarge the associate membership. I'm speaking for myself. I wear a lot of different hats, but we need to have the farmers, and we need to have everybody sitting at the table. We need to have the presence. You need to be able to look us in the face and say, okay, we understand where you're coming from. We're not asking for a vote. We're asking to be heard. And the transparency in regards to the Brown Act, I'm glad to know that this is finally going to happen, because there's been a lot of teleconference calls. The public has not been able to participate. And when you don't participate, you dredge up all kinds of things in your mind. So you really need to have the transparency for the rest of us. And I would love to see some of those teleconferencing notes. I really would.
Those are all on the web. They're all online.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
But I really think you need to enlarge the associate. Not saying that they need to vote.
Okay.
But we need a presence. Everybody needs a presence.
Okay. Thank you, Sophia.
Yes, Mike Neal. I was glad to hear the gentleman come up here and make some statements to the effect that there are GSAs either formed or being formed that have representative vote of all the different entities in their basin. And I have spoken on this about just about every meeting that I've come to on this, and I still am not seeing, and I'm just going to take the one case, which I do not belong to. I live in the city, and I actually feel overrepresented in that case because I have both the city and the water district voting in my interests here on this board. But the private well owners only have MIC, okay? Unfortunately, based on politics, the members of the basin in his mind are the majority of the people that they're in Ridgecrest. They're in the city. So, he seems to be a fair guy, but, a lot of those private well owners are going to be going, well, Vic's going to vote in favor of the city residents because they're the bulk of the people that he represents around here. There must be a way And you could dream up some schemes. I just did this 5 minutes ago. Let the private well owners form some kind of association whereby they elect a representative. And that guy gets to sit on the board and vote in their interest. Be there other interests, that might feel like they're being left out of the process. Inventive people can come up with ways to make these things happen so that, we're not just talking about, one particular pistachio farmer getting a vote, one particular, alfalfa farmer getting a vote, or whatever, that you get the group of people of that particular type. They get a representation instead of feeling, left off here, and maybe, they're going to let them have their associate membership and speak up and say things. But I know very well, over 10 years of speaking at council meeting, it's a whole lot different getting to have your say and getting to have a vote and decide how it goes. So I have my say, and most of the time I don't think anybody's, really listening and anything's getting done based on that. If I had a vote, it would be a whole lot different deal. And these guys have a lot at stake. In fact, they're the ones probably seeing more directly than almost anybody else, the effects and the success and the results of what's going on with this GSA and the upcoming GSP that's going to be policing how they use their water and how they have to report and so forth and so on and so on. And for them to feel like, well, we have no vote in the process, we just get told what to do, I think is an unacceptable position to have them put in. So that's all I had to say. The other was kind of a question, maybe this is shooting too out far in the future, but how do we claim that we have approached sustainability? Do we just reduce the slope of the line and say, well, in general, now we only have all the wells going 3/4 of a foot down per year, or, and how do we satisfy the state within our claims? Because obviously, if you can make up your own, if I can make up my own goals for performance, I would always perform perfect.
Well, let's
my 30 years on the base, I didn't get to do that. I had to kind of meet somebody else's standards. So I'm curious now. I mean, I should know this, but I don't know this. Right?
Okay, maybe we should let Tim. Would you? Yeah.
Well, the simplest answer, or the simplest scenario, let me put it that way, would be that, yes, groundwater levels are no longer declining. That's the simple answer. Because the law says, it also says it's a judgment of what's significant and unreasonable groundwater level declines. It may be that, it could be not completely stable, but there could be some variability in that. And but the simplest scenario is, yes, stabilization, and I think I'll just leave it there. You want to add something?
Oh, certainly. Go ahead.
I want to address Mr. Neal, your original comments about participation and the comments I heard earlier about participation. I think we've gotten away from something that was mentioned earlier that's very important for people to understand, and that is that putting aside the issue of associate membership or voting membership or whatever, the most important thing that we're going to do initially is develop our GSP, our plan, and we've committed that members of the public, including all of these groups that we're talking about, can be invited up to participate in a committee. I've been given direction that we have to have meaningful participation. I know the other entities have as well. So everyone's going to have a voice. And I heard, well, why not associate membership? Honestly, the place where the action's happening initially is going to be in that GSP committee. That's where you want to be. So if you're out there and you're concerned about this and you want a hand in this, volunteer for that committee, and we'll try to come up with a process to make sure we can get as many people in as we can. That's where you want to be. That's where the action's going to happen.
Thanks, Keith.
Well, I'll just come back to that to say that the few well owners that I know don't really feel like they're getting an adequate voice in the process, and they're not real happy about it.
All right. Would you like to speak? Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. You're going to be probably the last one because we're going to close this at 7. We're going to honor time. Okay. Go ahead.
My name's Elaine Mead. Good afternoon, evening. I want to go back to the associate director, Keith just addressed that. I think maybe what we're looking at is, while we're looking at a board of elected officials, you do have 2 associate members on your board right now. They're not elected, and we as the general public can't vote them off. That being the Navy and the BLM. We have absolutely no say-so in their representation. What is the difference in their position as associate directors and an associate director for the well owners or the farmers or anybody else? The business people, maybe the business people don't feel like the city represents them. Maybe they want different representation. And to say that you can be voted off is not exactly true, because while I may think that Peggy does a great job as mayor or that Mick is a great supervisor, I may not think that either one of them is the best person to be on this water authority. So am I going to give up my mayor or my supervisor or my district representative because I don't like the job they're doing on the water board, which they weren't elected for that to begin with? So the associate directors being on your board, I don't think demean it at all, and it would only strengthen it.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to comment on that?
We were going to, having associate directors would demean the board. Elaine, did we say that?
I think the implication is that it would weaken it, because otherwise, why not put associate directors on there that represent a wide variety of what our valley is, what our basin is made up of?
Peter?
The distinction is the 2 federal agencies, so they kind of encompass the rest of the universe that we don't. But they are a non-voting member. So it's kind of the way the puzzle fits the best. And so it was crafted that way. The other thing is I want to reiterate what Keith said. My board demands that everybody's included on these advisory committees. It's a mandate, and I'm sure Peggy's does as well. So there will be no exclusions. I know I explained this to you yesterday. Was it yesterday? Anyways, about how where the JPA is from the GSA. The GSP is where everything happens. The JPA, the GSA is just the foundation of that. But really everything will be done with the GSP, and everybody wants everybody else to be a part. And as far as transparency goes, the only reason that we had these conference calls is because we were dialing out legal issues, and legal issues is something you just don't do in public. As a board, we'd be doing it in a closed session, if you're going to buy something or negotiate something. So the legal issues was the driver. But that ceases to happen the minute we form this JPA.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Elaine. Yes, go ahead, Nick.
I think there's some good questions. Quite frankly, I thought your statement about good supervisor, not so good water representative on the GSA is well taken. I think that that's going to change. I think that the role of this the brand new organization that we're starting here, this GSA, is going to grow in influence in this community and all through Southern California immensely, and it's going to change the dynamic. And I think water boards, water districts, and water boards are going to gain importance and as pivotal decision makers in our communities more than they ever have before. So I think you're seeing a supervisor's role here, and your perception of a supervisor here, and a role as a water person over here different. I think that's going to balance off as time goes on, as a natural consequence of how the GSA is developed and how it implements and takes action. If anybody here took any thought that from my thoughts or my words that the associate member is a demeaned as demeaning in any way whatsoever, you're wrong. Or if I did not say, and let me say clearly that I think the most important role that anybody can possibly have in this GSA is going to be in your voice in the development of the GSP. That is going to be the pivot point. The people up here are going to vote on it, but you're going to have direct access into how that plan is constructed. I had something else. I can't figure out what it was, but I thought there were some very good points.
Thank you, Elaine.
May I ask Supervisor Gleason another question?
We have 5 minutes.
I'm going to just mention one thing. I'm elected as a county supervisor in Inyo County, but I'm assigned to the local air board. And that's a really important position in Inyo County because of the one's Dry Lake. And I'm in the same spot that these guys will be in that they're elected as a county supervisor, but work on a board that controls some other part of the county or actions that are happening in the county. And I don't think there'll be any difference at all in a very short time. You'll view his actions or your representative's actions, both as a supervisor and in representing you on multiple issues.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Matt.
I had one other comment concerning
it has to be very quick.
I'll be very quick.
Thank you.
Meaningful participation. Okay, I hear that word thrown around a lot, and this board is normally on they have meaningful participation. I heard in a Board of Supervisors meeting, Mr. Gleason questioning meaningful participation when they were talking about a GSA in the other valley. And at that point, he was asking for meaningful participation to make sure that Kern County had that. And I was just wondering if he might share a little bit of what he felt being on the outside and wanting that meaningful participation.
The question is, I have two basins. This is one. The other one is the Kern County sub-basin, Tulare Basin, which is a much more complicated. Not demeaning this one, but I mean that's just a difficult one. And so we had a Kern County Groundwater Authority that was moving forward, making decisions. That had a JPA. They were doing all this stuff, and all of a sudden, 3 GSA applications were submitted. One from North Kern, combined with Bakersfield and ID4, another one with Deerfield, Greenfield, and another one with Buena Vista Water Storage Company. They each submitted GSAs independent. They're in the same basin. But it was an indicator that the current Groundwater Authority was not succeeding in keeping everybody as a collaborative enterprise, and they were branching off. So the Board of Supervisors said, well, how, Buena Vista submitted to be a GSA, and the question to us was, how do our, independent of Kern County, so we weren't even in the conversation. It's not like here at all. And so what Elaine is referring to is the discussion we had last week where Kern County made a decision that we submitted an overlapping GSA application to overlap Buena Vista because of several reasons. The reasons I said was because I was worried about representation. I may have people in that water storage district, which I don't with Buena Vista, but I do with the other ones, that I would be delegating my representational responsibilities to a water district. So if someone wanted to put in a mall, they'd have to go to the water storage district to gain approval rather than going through me. And where does my policing authorities and my zoning privilege rights and my ability to develop a general plan for that area and the people that lived in Buttonwillow and all those people, if you submit an independent application for GSA, what is my meaningful participation? And I think I used the word. Did I use the word? Yeah, okay. So it was a similar word. To me, meaningful, to answer your question specifically, I'm not viewing it as an outsider. I'm viewing it as an insider. I have police authorities. I'm not going to surrender them to anyone, anytime, any place, unless I'm sitting at the table in a conversation with them with an equal vote. That's the only time I will surrender, or the Kern County Board of Supervisors will even consider having a negotiation with those authorities, is when we have a meaningful, which is a vote from an insider. I need to vote. It's my police authorities. You gave them to me, and I'm not going to give them to anybody else. That's the difference in the words.
Thank you, Mac. Thank you. Sir, I will let you have your time to ask your question.
I'll be quick.
That's okay. We actually started a few minutes late, and so you have, you certainly take what...
Timing. Ron Kosinski,
we have more than that
South
because
Down
we started
Street.
at 5 or 10
Yes.
after.
I just have a couple quick things, and
Okay, what's your name,
I'll be
sir?
done.
I'm sorry.
Ron Kosinski.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, thank you. I do not want the state involved. You guys keep pushing ahead, get this thing done, get it done on time, keep the state out of it. That's number one I want to say. Number two is, as I understand it, the BLM and the Navy are, by choice, associate directors. Is that correct? They had an opportunity to become full voting directors by law, but by choice? Or is that...
So, under federal ethics rules, we couldn't participate in the same manner as the rest of these agencies up here. We're restricted from voting in what we call non-federal entities, and unless there's a special dispensation from Congress, and we didn't see that happening. So associate member was the way for us to do the same thing, which by the way, we have some of those same regulatory powers over the land that we own out there on the base. So that puts us in sort of a similar position to these other agencies, at least over the land that we have jurisdiction over. So we wanted to participate in a meaningful way, but we couldn't go as far as voting, and because of fiscal restrictions, we couldn't do the buy-in that the other agencies are doing. That's the reason we came up with this other membership category.
Okay. But by definition, you could have been voting members, but because of the regulations you fall under, as well as the BLM, you end up under associate. Okay, that's I understand. I wasn't going to go on about associate members versus committees, but I fully agree that the committees is where the hard work's going to be done. That is where the voice is going to be of anybody that wants to be involved in this, and the law mandates that you have participation of groundwater users, and to me, that is the most important place to be. And finally, I think everyone seems to be overlooking the fact that, as I understand it, that the GSA is going to have the authority to maybe issue some kind of fees, whether it be through their individual authorities for the groups that they represent, or some kind of fees. And I, for one, do not want somebody sitting on the board who's a voting member, or will they even have the authority to issue those kind of fees or directives. And I believe that's a very important point that hasn't been made. So somebody sitting on a board that is not representing a voted elected official really doesn't have the authority to issue any kind of fees, taxes, or whatever may be necessary to make this thing run. I hate to say those kind of words, but I do notice it's going to cost money. Is that a true statement?
Who would like to? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I take it that was a big driving force of what created this. Okay. And I believe that's it. Again, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. All right. Any last words? Any last comments? It's 7:01. We did a good job. Well, I would thank you all for coming. I'm sure that these representatives thank you for all your input, your questions and comments. And we will be back with you with a public hearing, and then they will all be Brown Act meetings. So thank you all for coming. And we'll see you soon, probably in August.